have been forced into exile. Many of you are here. Dozens of media outlets have been shut down or silenced. And the ones that are still there are facing constant censorship, threats of violence, arbitrary detention, and even execution. I think it's fair to say that women journalists in particular have been facing disproportionate repression and are forced to stay silent or flee for their lives. And we have to ask ourselves the question of how can we reverse this trend, reverse what's happening? Because the dismantling of the justice system and its replacement by all-male courts and all-male justice, which has led to the arbitrary arrest of peaceful protesters, Hazaras, other religious and ethnic minorities, to say nothing of LGBTQ communities living in fear of the death penalty for the crime of simply being who they are. And I have to say that it's thanks to the journalists who are here that we know anything about what's going on. And the fact that we still do have access to a media that is able to give us the word as to what is happening. And so the media that are present are playing a crucial role in supporting everyone who's striving for human rights, for democracy, and for accountability. Independent journalism has exposed corruption, it has highlighted human rights abuses, and it has given a voice to marginalized communities that otherwise wouldn't happen. So we have to pay tribute to that resilience. We have to stand in solidarity with them. We also have to continue to find ways to support them in every way that we possibly can. Canada's approach has been perhaps a little different than many countries. Our view is that there is no reasoning with the Taliban at the moment. We've tried, many routes have been tried to discuss and to engage, but we've found that they're not interested in engaging. And in fact, quite the opposite is happening. The Taliban is clearly determined to follow a path that I think will lead to its own self-destruction. And so Canada's view is we have to find ways of supporting the citizens of Afghanistan and the people of Afghanistan without supporting the government in any way, shape, or form. That puts us at odds with some other governments who take a slightly different approach. But I'm delighted my colleague from the Netherlands is here because Canada and the Netherlands have been working very closely on the work that we're doing at the International Court of Justice and elsewhere. And we have a particular strong interest in, and a similar interest in, the approach. It's interesting that I think both of our countries were actively involved in the fight against the Taliban. We were actively engaged in the events after 9/11. And we remained not only partners in that fight, but also partners in the need to increase and improve health, education, and women and girls' rights in what is, as I said, a deteriorating situation. I'm sorry that my schedule, because you will appreciate that we're in the middle of this crazy 2-week period when there's side events after side events after side events. And as the president of ECOSOC, I have to go to quite a few meetings. But I'm delighted to be able to join you when I was asked to join. I looked at my schedule and said, well, I'm supposed to be 2 other places at the same time. And then I said, well, I don't want to miss being in this place because our work together is very important. And the main thing I want to say to all of you is we have to continue to create space for hope. We cannot let the Taliban win in their determination to shut down any such space. We're going to win this fight. We are going to win this fight. Even in the darkest moments, we have to understand that what the Taliban are trying to do is so unjust, it is so brutal, and it is so wrong that it is inconceivable that we would simply let it happen and say, oh, it's inevitable. Afghanistan is returning to its traditional way of being. And I can remember when we were discussing, when I first got here in 2020, we were talking about what might happen or what could happen. And there were so many people who said to me, it can't happen because Afghanistan has changed forever. And there is no way that it's going to go back to that kind of thinking. Well, the Taliban have won a certain military victory because, frankly, it was given to them on a platter. They didn't win it. It was given to them. And that mistake has happened, and it was a terrible mistake. But that doesn't mean we give up. It doesn't mean we stop fighting. And I think we have to continue to keep pushing and keep pressing hard, pushing hard for the victory that we want to see. Sayara, your struggle is supported by us, and the loss that you have suffered, and the personal price that you have paid for the fight is something that we have an obligation to continue to stay with you and fight with you in this battle for freedom. So we'll keep fighting.
Of course, I would like to mention, as Ambassador Ray pointed out, that Canada, Australia, and Netherlands, along with Germany, 4 countries were last year they took the initiative to hold the Taliban accountable under the CEDAW, and that's something that we have always been calling and some tangible actions, and we are truly appreciative for that.
In Netherlands' human rights policy, we have identified media freedom as one of our priorities. This includes safety for journalists, including prevention of threats, protection against threats, accountability for violence against journalists, support for independent media, access to reliable information, and countering disinformation. We are also a member of the Media Freedom Coalition ever since it was founded in 2019. We contribute to a number of programs that aim to improve freedom of press and protection of journalists. So now turning to why we're here. The human rights situation in Afghanistan is extremely difficult, and it's getting worse. The implementation of the Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice law has even made the situation more difficult. It restricts publication of images of living beings and bans women's voices in public space. Media freedom and independent journalists are important benchmarks because the freedom of press leads to accountability and public debate. Those freedoms are at present not existing in Afghanistan. Journalism is limited, access to information is restricted, and the media is censored. Journalists are the victim of intimidation, arbitrary arrest, and even torture because of their profession. The recent closure and reopening of Radio Begum is an example in case. We, as the international community, have a duty to continue to address this important issue and make sure that Afghan journalists can do their work. As part of this effort, the Kingdom of the Netherlands has been supporting women radio journalists in Afghanistan by offering internships, for instance, and for production and for broadcasting. Today, we're here not to listen to me, but to listen to Afghan journalists and filmmakers who are continuing to do their work in incredibly challenging circumstances. We can't close our eyes for what is happening in Afghanistan, and their work educates and informs us.
Senator from British Columbia, and I'm honored and delighted to be at this meeting. I had the opportunity to take part in a similar discussion in Ottawa a few weeks ago, and there was in many senses an introduction for me to this very important topic of media freedoms and independent journalism in Afghanistan. I'm pleased also to be the only representative of the Canadian Parliament at this event. And I want to assure you that all of my colleagues in the Canadian Parliament, I can certainly speak for the Senate and very confidently speak for the House of Commons as well, that all of my colleagues are 100% in support of your mission and what you're trying to achieve.
fell in 2021, we faced an unprecedented crisis that demanded action beyond the usual scope for a media development organization like the kind that I run. The collapse of Afghanistan's independent media and the targeting of journalists, particularly women, by the Taliban required immediate action. In response, journalists for human rights joined forces with a large coalition of partners, including Senator Al-Mikdar, and other veterans groups, unions, and press freedom organizations, bankers, rabbis. The range of people involved in this effort was enormous. In order to evacuate Afghan journalists and human rights defenders who were at extreme risk. Today, we got evacuated over 2,400 at-risk individuals, primarily to Canada, and an additional 560 at-risk Afghans who were either journalists or human rights defenders or their families. We have helped to secure safe passage to countries including Germany, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. Evacuation was just the beginning, however. In Canada, government support expires after 1 year, leaving many vulnerable. In response, Journalists for Human Rights established a series of fellowships with leading Canadian media outlets, including the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, Global News, Canadian Press, and others, with support of Meta. And half of the fellows in our program have been able to since find permanent employment in Canadian media. This is a success that we are incredibly proud of and would like to do more of. But for those left behind, the focus of today's conversation, the situation is dire. I'd like to introduce you to Nahid, a 27-year-old broadcast journalist from Herat province. I have taken the liberty of changing her name in order to protect her identity. Nahid was on TV in the previous era. She reported stories on camera about women's rights and Taliban corruption. That makes her now amongst the most at risk. Her face and profile are widely known. In recent months, Taliban commanders have visited her house. They demanded that she marry one of them and threatened her family with violence if she refused. Nahid fled with her family, changing both their location and their identity. Now in hiding, the threat is ever present. Her family has actually considered marrying her off against her will, just to make the threat go away. Nahid's experience is sadly emblematic of the kind of brutal repression and retaliation that journalists, and particularly women journalists, now face. Last year, our program manager, Mushtaba Harris, conducted in-depth interviews with 350 Afghan journalists across Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Turkey. His work documents how exiled journalists face legal uncertainties, threat of deportation, economic hardship, harassment, and issues that are difficult to, frankly, imagine as human beings. Afghan journalists in Pakistan reported working in non-journalism fields, such as selling goods, driving Uber, and other low-skilled jobs. 82% of the interviewed journalists reported earnings below 65% of their previous income in Afghanistan. Many have either faced deportation themselves or have family members who have faced deportation. This year, our research has focused specifically on women under Taliban rule, particularly journalists. We interviewed 67 women, including Nahid, across 12 provinces in Afghanistan, along with 12 representatives from women-led organizations and human rights defenders. And the findings are stark. 88% reported an inability to continue their work. Almost 90% have experienced directly or know someone who has experienced gender-based violence. This includes harassment, domestic abuse, and the kind of forced marriage I mentioned earlier, or the threat of forced marriage. 94% reported severe psychological distress, including depression and loss of hope. Despite these obstacles, social media remains a vital information source for these women, underscoring its crucial role in enabling Afghan women to stay informed and connected to the world. Our research provides concrete evidence of the Taliban's systematic efforts to erase women from public life and silence their voices. Women journalists in Afghanistan are among the most at risk of women worldwide.
I have worked in Afghan media over 15 years. I know I'm giving up my age now. When I was 15, I started working for media, and It has been over 15 years. I cannot believe that. But I'm so honored to share this panel with some of the most powerful women from Afghanistan. My colleagues that we work together in Afghanistan in Tolo News, Hasiba, Anisa, and also Sahra, and also my dearest friend and fellow alumni from NYU, which we went to grad school together, Mariam, who's doing fantastic work right now in the UN.
طالبان و بعضی چیزهایی که از حکومت قبلی افغانستان برشان به میراث رسیده ادامه میدن. به گونه مثال در مرکز رسانه های حکومت میآیند و نشست حسابدهی به ملت را برگزار میکنن. اما به طور مثال وقتی یک خبرنگار از وزیر تحصیلات عالی طالبان ندا محمد ندیم میپرسه که تا چه وقت قرار است دانشگاه ها بسته باشه و چه وقت دانشگاه ها برای دختران بازگشایی میشن، وزیر طالبان به خبرنگار میگه که تا زمانی که ما دیگه اجازه ندادیم حتی پرسیدن این سوال ممنوع است.
دیگه هیچ انسانی حق بلند کردن صدای خود نداره. این تنها برای زن خبرنگار نیست. امروز مرد خبرنگارم در عین وضعیتی قرار داره که امروز زن است. زن و مرد همزمان صدایش خفه شده.
When we live in a country that any human being doesn't have any voice, even a man, even a woman
don't have a voice.
don't have a voice,
Don't have a right.
don't have a right.
وقتی که طالبان آمدن به افغانستان، من یک بار دیگه تکرار میکنم که هیچ ما رسانه‌ای به نام رسانه آزاد در افغانستان نداریم. تمام رسانه هایی که امروز در داخل افغانستان هستن اینا زیر اداره طالب کار میکنن و به فرمایش طالب کار میکنن و اینا مجبور هستن که تبلیغ کنن برای نفع طالبان. من یک چیز دیگر اشاره کنم با محاسبه جان اشاره کردن. هیچ اطلاعاتی این تنها نیست که در مورد مردم از افغانستان بیرون نمیشه. حتی هیچ کسی در مورد خود طالبان هم نمیتونه اطلاعات بیرون بده و این در دراز مدت افغانستان را کاملا به حاشیه میبره. وقتی جهان نفهمه که در درون از کشور چی میگذره، چطور میتونه که به مردم افغانستان کمک کنن؟ چطور میتونه توجه کنن؟ افغانستان به فراموشی سپرده میشه. وقتی شما در مورد یک مسئله صحبت نکنید، هیچ صدایی از این کشور بیرون نشود، دنیا چی میکنن که در این مملکت چی میگذره؟ راهی که امروز اطلاعات از افغانستان چطور بیرون میشه، این رسانه ها هستن که اطلاعات کمی که این چیزی ما میشنویم، چیزی که ما میشنویم، این از طریق شهروند خبرنگاران از افغانستان میشن. تنها مردم هستن که با تلفن های خود یا میتونن اطلاعات بیرون بدن و تنها راه بیرون شدن اطلاعات.
Power of the media is well understood by the Taliban. Their control of the narrative is just as critical to their rule as is their military power. They use the media strategically and tactically to present themselves as a moderate government that restores order, fight corruption, or offer women some rights within an Islamic framework. If this false narrative goes unchallenged by independent media, it could lead to dangerously misdirected policies by the international community. When policymakers base their decision on incomplete or manipulated narratives, the consequences are far-reaching. If the Taliban media propaganda prevails, the world might normalize the Taliban rules, engage diplomatically with the regime without holding them accountable for human rights violations, fail to sufficiently support Afghan women or the humanitarian needs of population.
Being very cruel to the media, freedom of speech, and anything that can shed a light on the human rights abuses that we are seeing in Afghanistan. Despite all the restrictions that we heard from my colleagues that Taliban have in place on media and freedom of speech, truth always finds its way. Today's citizen journalists, while are the ordinary Afghan people, they might have a phone with a camera, they might not have a phone, but they might have access to social media, encrypted apps, or maybe they have to install VPNs to just connect with us, journalists in exile and people within the international community and delegations here at the UN and ambassadors to just document the human rights abuses that the Taliban are committing in Afghanistan. Not towards only women, LGBTQ plus community, ethnic groups, and also minorities and civilians and non-civilians, people who worked for previous government. So they are extraordinary people with a lot of courage, and they risk their lives. They may face a lot of hardship and the harshest treatments from the Taliban if they get caught. Digital citizens use apps and social media to report information, and they break the most important news about what is going on in Afghanistan. And this presents resistance, and this called digital resistance. In the past 3 years, what have Taliban done to Afghan people brought a lot of resistance and courage within the citizens of Afghanistan. Women and men came together side by side, tried to get every single little bit of information out of Afghanistan to us abroad, to us journalists in exile, to our independent media who are trying
I'm sorry to cut you
cover
off.
stories in Afghanistan.
That journalist left job, left country, and leave the Iran and Pakistan and Turkey. They are a very bad situation. Support that people, please.
So journalists in exile.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll hand it over to Ms. Nehan for the conclusion remarks. And thank you everyone for your patience. I know we went way out of time.
Well, thank you very much. Great job to all of you. With the permission of co-chairs, Ambassador Paul, Ambassador Hassan, and the rest of colleagues, that the different missions that they co-hosted today's event, as a member of the board member of the Dashti Foundation, I wholeheartedly thank you all for supporting today's event and bringing us together. For the sake of time, I will go for a very short conclusion because so much is being discussed. First of all, everybody's talking about the situation that we have in Afghanistan, that there is no free media, and Afghanistan that once used to have a vibrant media is totally going through censorship now, and then over 200 media outlets are being closed in the last few years. There is a very calculated action to censor and to close media because of the coverage of the truth and the atrocities that the Taliban are going to have. That is the reality that we are having right now. There is also an acknowledgement among the part of the speakers that the situation that we have in Afghanistan is getting worse and worse. There is also an anxiety among the young generation when they say that we do the research and we see that there is crisis in Afghanistan, there is a global challenge in Afghanistan, but despite that, they also don't see the action that we're expecting from the international community towards the situation. And then there is, of course, there are different restrictions that they are talking, which is not only limited to media, limited to women, men, everywhere in Afghanistan that Taliban have enforced. But what is really important, and then for us to remember, is that how the media in the last 3 years reorganized themselves. How those that they are now in exile are working to be able to work with those that are inside Afghanistan to be able to cover the stories. Yes, the media that they're operating inside Afghanistan, they don't have that freedom. But thankfully, we have a number of good and credible media outlets that now they're registered outside Afghanistan, they're working and they're disseminating the right information. Just imagine for a second, if we did not have connectivity, if we didn't have digital, if we didn't have social media, people would not have known what is happening in Afghanistan and what kind of graveyard it is being turned into by the Taliban. It's just because of these tools that we have. So we can use all these tools and we can support organizations such as the Dashti Foundation, that they continue to provide the dissemination of free media, because the space and the freedom that we have, those that are working inside Afghanistan, they don't have it. So we can cover for them, we can work with them, and we can facilitate that dissemination of information. So I myself, I did a fellowship in the last 5 months in one of the foundations in DC, and I was working with the impact of the civil society from exile for 2 countries. Honestly, I'm amazed with the work that media and civil society and women's groups, especially women's group, has done in the last 3 years in Afghanistan. These ladies, and they are the example of hundreds of Afghan women that they are in different parts of the world. All of them are going and working during the day to pay their bills. Then they are processing their papers for their resettlement. But then they quickly come and they also write something to be able to raise awareness about the situation in Afghanistan. So that has enabled us to prevent recognition of the Taliban, normalization of the Taliban, and try to make sure that we control the narrative. Taliban, with all the power that they have, still they don't control the narrative. We control the narrative, and I commend my sisters for that. So I hope that the next program that you're having next time, it will not be the demise of media. It's going to be the rise and resistance of media in the last 3 years, because we are not demised. We are going to rise again. We are going to resist, and we are going to win. Thank you all very much.
تشکر میکنم از همه شما. جان سپاس از همکاریتان، از اینکه امروز تایم گذاشتین همراه ما بودین، به خصوص جولیانا به خاطر یک دختر جوان کانادایی و یک ریسرچ بسیار خوب. بسیار تشکر.
So she is just, Ms. Dashti is expressing her heartfelt thanks to all of you for being here, and also to Ms. Juliana, one of the advocates here today at this event. And so with that, I would like to just say the last word from our perspective, from the mission of Afghanistan. We are honored to provide the platforms for these resilient, brave Afghan women. This is our duty and this is our job. And because we know that today Taliban are faced with Afghan women, and Afghan women they themselves are their ambassadors. They don't need any support of men of Afghanistan. They themselves are capable, strong, empowered. They are fighting, and we are very much proud of them. So from that perspective, we would like to just announce that our mission is co-hosting another side event with another group of Afghan brave women. And of course, one of them is Ms. Nehan's Faragir organization on 13th March from 10 o'clock at Conference Room 1. That's also about the voices of Afghan women from Afghanistan. So please join us in that meeting. And another side event on 14th of March on subject of education, WPS, and in general support of Afghan women. And the last side event on 17th is also particularly about the education and economic impacts. That's also jointly co-organized by our mission with Afghan women groups and Afghan women speakers. Please join us, and we will be happy to share the platform and hear your voices and support. Thank you so much for all of you for being here, and wish you a very wonderful